Hello again, and welcome back to my series of videos about the beginner's introduction to logic switches. In this episode, we're going to look at the multi-switch. Now, this is a rather odd thing, but it does have its uses. You may remember right at the start of this series of logic switch videos, I said that logic is a two-state thing. It's on or it's off. Or more strictly, it's on or it's not on. It's true or it's not true. It's yes or it's not yes. But in common language, we don't say not true or not yes or not on. We tend to say, false, off, no, that kind of thing. This switch introduces a third, I hesitate to call it a state. It's a sort of state in that it's undefined. We don't know whether it's on or it's off. It isn't on and it isn't off. The inputs are going to be sort of ons or offs, or they could be from a multi with one of its weird conditions, and we'll look at that. So let's go and have a look at what happens. Here is control 1, here's control 2, and they're both off. And therefore the output of the multi is off. If I switch them both on, the output of the multi is on. So to that extent, it's the same as an AND switch or an OR switch, because if both are off, ANDs and ORs are off. If both are on, ANDs and ORs are on. The difference is what happens when one is on and one is off. Remember, an AND would go to off, an OR would stay on, but the multi, what's this? A 0? Let's try it the other way around. Again, a 0. It is neither on nor off. Let's construct ourselves a little truth table. Remember these? Let's have a look at it. Now then, here's the multi-switch. Both off, the output is off. Both on, the output is on. To that extent, it's just like the OR, both off, off, both on, on, and the AND. Both switches off, off, both switches on, on. But here we introduce this bizarre new state of we don't know. And of course the not version is going to be like that. Okay, what can we do with this unknown condition? Well, we can't assign it to many places that you might use a logic switch, such as dual rates, flight modes, that kind of thing. But yes, you can assign it, but those things interpret the 0 as not on. In other words, it's not a tick, so it's off. And so you don't get a mid-state. You don't get a third state. As far as things like dual rates, flight modes are concerned, a multi-switch behaves like an AND switch in that they can see that as the on, but they would see that as being the same as that. And so you're not going to gain any advantage that way. So what on earth can we do with this multi-switch? Well, there are two things, or two places we can use it. And the most interesting one of these, straight away, is in a function. Now I've created 3 functions here called AND, OR, and multi. And of course they are assigned to the outputs of those switches, as sometimes you would assign a function to the output of a switch. For instance, I've shown in a previous episode controlling landing lights through a switch, but which also go up on and off as the retracting undercarriage goes down and up. So let's have a look at what difference this makes. The control function interprets the tick or a cross, i.e. on or off, as being at one end of travel or the other. So the AND gate, if we switch, is off. If we switch it on, the function goes to the opposite end of travel. Same is true for the OR switch. Again, both off, it's off. Both on, it goes to the other end of travel. And the multi, of course, does the same. Yeah, because again, when both are on or both are off, all three switches behave the same way. The difference is in this weird zero state. If I switch one on, the AND will stay off, the OR will go on, so that'll stay where it is, that'll go to the other end of travel. But look what happens to multi. It goes to the middle. It's behaving like a 3-position control switch, whereas ANDs and ORs behave as 2-position control switches. What does this mean in practice? Let's have a look at servos. Here's 3 servos. The AND switch, the OR switch, the multi switch. This is off position. If I move both switches to on, they all go on. So both both on, both off. But here is the difference that the multi makes. Remember, AND, OR, multi. If I switch one of them on, AND should stay off, OR will go on, and multi will go to middle position. Now I'll switch both on. So there we go. The multi gives us, in effect, a 3-position output that we can use in functions. And therefore, of course, you're not stuck with just going to the exact midpoint. If you were to use a function curve now on this function, you could have that midpoint. If you set 3 points rather than the standard curve, you could have, going to some nice midpoint. So there's a possible use for it. And the other place that it gets used is, as we've seen previously, in the extra safe throttle cut switch, where rather than just using this switch here, I'll use this SF as my throttle cut, and you would go to the throttle cut assignments in the advanced options, and you just assign that as your throttle cut. But of course, if the throttle was partly open, when you switch it on again, off would go the motor. So L5 and L6 here are the extra safe throttle cut, where if the throttle cut has been active and you switch it to switch the motor on, it still will not switch on until you've pulled the throttle stick all the way back. And we can see here L5 and L6 are set up as that. L6, the throttle cut switch, is then assigned to, into the advanced options, the throttle cut function, but it's reversed. It's made a knot. However, this behaves nicely with the apparent direction of the switch. And you can see here that L5 uses a multi. Why is that? Well, at the moment it's set for, if P4 is all the way back, i.e. throttle's at the off position or idle position, it's on. And if SF is forward, that's on. And so our multi switches on. But if one of them should switch off, for instance, I move the throttle forward, it goes to 0. Whereas an OR switch would have remained a tick, or an AND switch would have gone off to a cross. Again, I pull the throttle back, and now I'll operate the throttle cut switch. Again, it goes to 0, unless I push the throttle forward, in which case it will now go to an X. Okay, what does that have an effect on? Well, it has an effect on the real throttle cut logic switch, which uses the output of this and the position of the throttle cut switch. Now, if I operate the throttle cut switch, boom, it just goes off because the AND function is denied. We've got throttle cut. The interesting point comes is, where is the throttle stick? I've moved the throttle stick forward, so both SF and the throttle stick, being away from idle, are off. So P4 has gone off. L5 has gone off. if I was to move the throttle cut switch to its on position, this will now go to a 0 because the multi is seeing an off and an on, so it goes to 0. But L5 says L6 says an AND, which says I need both L5 on and the throttle cut switch forward. Well, it's got the throttle cut switch forward, but L5 is not on. It's a 0. It will only turn on when I get the throttle all the way backwards. Bingo. L5 switches on, and so L6 can say L5's on, switches forward, I switch on. Watch what happens when I move the throttle forward though. Of course L5 goes off because the throttle's gone to the off state, SF is still on, so it goes to 0. The throttle cut says I need that and that to be on, or should I say, if you think about it, not off and not off, not off and on. Well, L5 hasn't gone off, so L6 is reading it as being an on, and that's how the logic in that works. So there's two applications of this multi-switch. You can use it in functions assignment to turn a logic switch into a 3-position output rather than just 2 positions, and you can do some real fancy programming using logic switches if you're into that sort of thing. Okie doke, we'll see you for the next episode.